Hello and welcome to my ceramics project video, where I will inform you about our history movement in just a few minutes. Have you ever seen those really cool art pieces that look like they are floating by clever use of fishing line, and give us the impression that the air around them is moving and flowing as that artwork moves and changes shape? Or when an art piece is precisely balanced on a fine point, so that you can interact with it by spinning and observing as it changes form based on your perspective. Or even something as simple as a painting that looks like it moves in such ways that it is lifelike. Well, that, my friends, is all kinetic art. An art movement that uses repetition of form, shape, and textures, or implementation of moving parts, so that you, the viewer, can interact with and observe. To understand the what, why, and where kinetic art came from, I'm going to give you a brief summary of the movement that came before it and how it influenced the kinetic art movement. It's based off the conceptual art movement, where artists would praise the idea behind the physical components of the artwork rather than the artwork itself. Conceptual artists would often abandon beauty, rarity, and craftsmanship, and measure how impactful it was based off the idea portrayed. This movement often tries to capture motion with expressed lines, repetition of form and shape, contrasting the positive and negative spaces. And it worked even when it had no moving parts. It looked that in its nature that it flowed like water or air. But the idea of capturing motion in a static piece seemed kinda ironic, till one artist decided, why not just make it move? And boom, the kinetic art movement was set in motion. Sorry for my bad puns. Some early experiments with this movement go back to the 1910s and 1920s. One of the first would be Marcel Duchamp's bicycle wheel. All it was an inverted bicycle wheel on a stool. Yup, that simple. All he wanted to do, he said, was to watch it move. Later on in the year 1920, two constructive artists, Noam Guabo and Antoine Pensevere, used the term kinetic art in their realistic manifesto. Noam Guabo's piece, The Standing Wave, was exactly that, just a wave that stood on its side. Crafted from sheet metal and designed to oscillate, it showed the movement of a natural wave with contrasting shadows. Around the 1950s is when kinetic art started to take off. Just before that, in the year 1941, Alexander Calder, who is going to be a mechanical engineer, laid the foundation for what kinetic art would be to come. His work, known as Arc of Petals, was a piece that used natural movement by the air around it, the petals suspended in air and grounded by gravity. The biggest thing to take away from this art movement is not all the cool and wondrous things that these artists created, but how they used outlandish works to capture actual motion, and this motion, complex, has its own meaning and tends to tie into what is happening in society today. When kinetic art first started to take off in the 1950s, with the nations racing each other in the Cold War, pushing the limits of our technological advances, many artists used this as an underlying theme, showing us how war, conflicts, and threats of a nation pushes mankind to its greatest triumph, creating weapons of mass destruction or sending man to the moon. It was all about who can do it bigger, who can do it faster, and who can do it better. The kinetic art movement is still in motion, wink wink, more bad puns, to this day, using themes of scientific advancement. But this is a little bit more on how these advancements in technology will affect our way of life or drastically change the culture of one society. Who would have thought that an art piece that simply spins or appears to be moving can not only capture motion, but capture human achievement, being the amazing doors it opens and the untold means behind them. That's all I have time for. Thanks for watching.